So today's topic is tapirs, and of course, it's World Tapir Day. So I try to correlate our critter with what we're doing. Now, one reason we're doing tapirs is because they are rare and endangered, and they do live in Central and South America and in Asia, and those are all places I have been. Great, I see a lot of me's. Yes, the zoo counts. So I've been really lucky to be in a lot of habitats where tapirs live, and I've stayed at national parks where they have what we call camera traps. So that means a little camera that's usually attached to a tree, and it takes a picture every time an animal walks by. And so I've seen the images from the camera traps of guys I've seen. Let's see, I've been to La Tigra National Park in Guatemala, Manu National Park, and the lowlands of Amazonia in Peru. I've seen camera trap photos in Pico Bonito National Park in Honduras, and also in Borneo. So I've been really lucky, and so that's one reason we're doing tapirs. Also because we can kind of make a picture for ourselves of their habitat, because many of you have been with me many of these sessions, and you know I've done a lot of things from the tropics, and especially a lot of things from the New World tropics since I've traveled there so much. So imagine all those other species that are sharing this habitat with the tapirs that we have sketched together. So we've done, let's see, they're back behind me. We've done red-eyed tree frogs and orchids and heliconias and pit vipers. What else? The orb weaver spiders and the toucans and the hummingbirds on Wednesday. So think about all those species that we've illustrated. Those guys are all sharing this habitat with these tapirs. Okay, great. So moving on. Another reason I'm doing tapirs is because they're a really ancient mammal that's barely changed in millions of years, and they have a really good and very long fossil record. And it just happens that I live in Central Oregon, and just east of us are these incredible fossil beds, because there are some wonderful layers of sedimentary rock that go back 50 million years. And so we've got lots of tapir fossils right here in Oregon. And they are also in the same beds with their relatives. And we'll talk about them in a minute. So yeah, these are some murals from the John Day Fossil Beds Park, just a couple hours from me, where these are illustrations of some of the relatives, the ancient relatives of the tapirs. Now, speaking of those relatives and those fossils, we've also sketched the other members of this order. So tapirs are in their order called Perissodactyl, and that only includes rhinos, horses, and tapirs. And so we've already drawn rhinos together. We've already drawn wild horses, like the horse that's shown in this image here, the Przewalski's horse of Asia, right? And so they all have a really similar build. Now, you might think they're related to something like a hippo because they're kind of more squat and they live in the water, but they're not. That's just kind of the idea of convergent evolution, kind of coming to look like each other because they have a similar lifestyle. Okay, good. Okay, good. So anyway, they're relatives. And so we've already drawn those. I know a lot of you guys have already drawn both the horse and the rhino with me. If you guys have drawn both the horse and the rhino with me, say both in the chat box over here. Now, where do tapirs live? So we've got 4 species of tapirs in the world, and they used to live in a lot more places. Okay, good. I see a lot of both. So they used to be over North America and Europe and Asia, and now they're restricted to just a few places. There are many species of tapirs from the fossil record that all went extinct, and what we have left are 4 species. Now, 3 of them live in Central or South America. So this is an example of the Baird's tapir, which is the one I've seen tracks of, and I've seen camera photos of basically in Central America. And then there's a mountain tapir that lives in the higher mountains where it actually gets cold and freezes, and they're kind of down more here. And then there's the, let me see. Oh yeah. And then there's the Brazilian tapir, which isn't a very good name for it. So it's also called the lowland or South American tapir. And it lives in a lot of countries farther south. And so that's our 3 species of New World, basically neotropics, tapirs, we call them. And then over in Malaysia, there's just one left, and that's the Malayan tapir. And so they're over in, well, they used to be in Borneo. We're not quite sure. I don't think they're there anymore, but I have visited areas that they used to live in Borneo. But they're also found, let's see, where are the countries? Let's see. Oh, yeah. Myanmar, Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, Thailand, and Vietnam. So that's kind of a really interesting disjunct distribution of that family. And they're all in their own family. So they're just, the tapirs are in their own family in the order that includes the families of horses and the families of rhinos. So within those habitats, or that geographic range, they live in a lot of different habitats, and they need many acres to survive. So they're kind of called what's known as an umbrella species, because they are like a big distribution umbrella. And if you can save their habitat, you can save the habitats of a lot of other species that live with them. And okay, great. Lily and Jacob said you've been to Malaysia and Borneo and Thailand. Right. Okay, good. So they, but one common denominator is they're always near water. So they really like water, partly because they eat aquatic vegetation some of the time, and because they like to swim and they like to cool down, because they're pretty large. They're about as large as a cow. And they can be about 6 feet long and several hundred pounds and several feet high. So kind of think of a smallish cow. And they're actually the largest mammal in their habitats. And so anyway, they really like water for both cooling off and food. The larger an animal is, the harder time it is to lose heat. So if they get too hot, they need someplace cool. And they can escape predators there because they can swim well. So their predators include jaguars and also crocodiles. So, and then lots of, once they die, then lots of other scavengers can take advantage of their bodies too. And so you can imagine they would be a really good resource, both alive and dead. And so, they're also, like I said, found in aquatic areas, both wetlands and lakes and rivers. They're in the tropical rainforests, both the lowland rainforests like in Amazonia, and but also higher elevations, like I saw them in Honduras and Peru. Oh, and there's just another couple pictures. They can also be found more in savannas and grassland habitats. And so, yeah, they really love the water, and you can see their little snouts there. Their snouts can act as kind of like a snorkel, so they can swim in deeper water, and their snout is very flexible, and they can flex it upward. Oh, Lily said, what's a group of tapirs called? I don't know. That's a good question. But most herds of animals do have a name, but that's a good thing to bring up because most of them are pretty solitary, except for the time that the mother is raising the young and the young is with them for a couple of years. They're really pretty solitary, so they don't hang out in big herds naturally. So Eliana, yeah, they're not generally living together. They're more solitary. Okay. So anyway, we're going to show a few images from my buddy James. He's a colleague of mine who's a naturalist in Honduras, and he has a bird watching and nature photography tour company called Natural Selections, and he takes a lot of great pictures. So he's donated a few pictures here. And so this is one of them from a habitat that we've both been in Honduras, kind of in the west, no, the northeast, the area, very remote area called La Mosquitia, or the Mosquito Coast. And so here you see it in more of this kind of grassland habitat. Okay, and then here's another one, the South American or Brazilian tapir, more along the riverbanks. And this is like a sandy riverbank. And this species has kind of like a mane. That's one way you can see it. Oh, Diane, you're right. A group of tapirs is called a candle. Isn't that very interesting? I don't know why. And so here's another Brazilian tapir. And so you can kind of see it's this mane-like structure there. And they also have these white tips to their ears. Isn't that funny? What else about this picture? Yeah, okay. Okay, so going on a little bit to the parts, because as you know, or if you don't know, in case you're new, is I really do like to talk about the anatomy so that we really understand that before we get sketching. Because the better you know the parts of an animal and what makes them different than other close relatives, the better it will be, the easier it will be for you to draw them, okay? And so at this point, if you've been in the chat box, I'm not going to ask you any questions anymore. So you can minimize that chat box if you want, so that you can just see the slides. And you guys are talking a lot in the chat. So let's go be silent now, else I will mute you. And before I get going any farther, let me just look a little bit here. Oh, yeah, right. That's right. Good. Okay, great. So the anatomy, anyway. So this is a really great picture of that snout we are talking about. That's one of the most unique things that obviously makes them really different from their closest relatives, the rhinos and the horses. And that snout is really flexible. It's almost like a short elephant trunk. And they really use it a lot like an elephant trunk to help them to grasp food. They are browsers, and they're browsing on leaves as well as grazing sort of on grass. And they eat a lot of fruits in the forest. And in fact, they've been called gardeners of the forest because they'll eat that entire fruit and then they'll walk away a few, 100 yards or a mile away, and then they'll defecate. And that fruit seed will mature and sprout. And so they help to distribute all of the shrubs and trees in the forest. And if it weren't for them and other like fruit-eating birds like toucans, then the forest would be a lot less biodiverse. So anyway, here's a great picture. You see that long snout that's super flexible. And sorry, here we go. Yeah, and there's another picture of the snout kind of going down. So up and down. In this species, the Malaysian one, you also see these kind of white markings on the ears. A lot of animals have markings on their ears, including things like lions and leopards and cheetahs. Markings to help to communicate with each other and to help see in the dark, because that other one you saw, the Malaysian one at night, was all dark. Or sorry, the Brazilian one was all dark, except for that. Okay, Rebecca, stop sharing YouTube channels. Okay, let's get moving. So now we want to, we talked about their snout and their head and their feeding, and then their bodies. So their bodies are really big and bulky. Again, they're about the size of a cow. Now, this Malaysian one is the only one that's black and white stripes. All the other ones are just kind of more plain brown. Yes, Sayla asks why. That's a great question. We don't know why. Sometimes color patterns can be a combination of genetics and chance. It just happens that which individuals were more successful at living longer and breeding, and maybe they had a certain color pattern that they passed on, just like, you know, brown hair or green eyes or blue eyes or something like that. Sometimes it's chance, and sometimes it's related to camouflage or something else. So they have a really thick body and super thick skin. So that skin is going to help protect them, kind of like the skin of a rhino. Remember, their close relative, the rhino, helps protect them from predators. So they're going to have predators like the leopards and the jaguars. So there's jaguars in the New World and leopards in the Old World. Sayla says it looks like a panda, right? And what else about them? Let's see. They're narrower in the front and kind of bulkier in the back, and that gives them sort of a teardrop shape to help them to move through the thick vegetation that they often live in. Now, we always do look at a skeleton because that understanding the skeletal structure underneath really helps us to show, especially the angles that we need to show to draw something correctly. And so with so many of these animals we've drawn, we've drawn a lot of four-legged critters, including horses and the giraffes and other things. And they have a very similar body style to a lot of other mammals, including us, if we were on all fours. So, they have that same backbone, vertebral column with the ribs, and they've got the shoulders, and this is the edge of the shoulder. We want to show that bump there. And there's the elbow. We're going to want to show that. And then usually there's a little bump where the hips are on top. And then sometimes a little corner here near their tail, the hip that we sit on. And then, of course, the knees and the patella or the kneecap, just like us. Yes, no, it's not, Rebecca. This isn't a panda. No, so we're in a whole different family. Okay. Okay, so anyway, that's that. Oh, and yeah, and then you also see the toes. We'll talk about the toes again in a second. But kind of a weird thing is they've got 4 toes on the front, and they've got 3 toes on the back. And we sort of see those on our cheat sheet that we're going to draw from. Okay, then going to color patterns, like we said, the Malaysian one is the only one that's the black and white stripes. All of the neotropical species, all 3, they're more of a brownish or grayish, but they also still have those kind of white ears that are kind of sticking out. And then this one is the Brazilian one because it's got that sort of a upright mane that's kind of like a miniature zebra mane. So again, that's kind of harking back to their horse relatives that are in the same order. Now, the calves are camouflaged like the calves we're going to draw today. So they've got these patterns of brown and white spots. Notice my brown and white spots and stripes. I couldn't find a shirt that had stripes. Okay, so those baby calves are going to be camouflaged in their habitat because you can imagine how tasty a big fat calf would be. And it would be a lot easier for a jaguar or even some of the other New World cats and crocodiles to eat. And there's another baby. Isn't that the cutest thing? Some people have called it like a little watermelon because it's got the stripes. Yes, this one is too cute. And you see it's trying to sort of learn to use its trunk like an elephant does. Okay, and then, talking about the body again, here's just how the Brazilian one has this mane. So that's kind of unique. Okay, and then this shows also, this guy is back to the Malaysian, and it's showing really well the toes in front, although it doesn't show all 4 of them, but in this picture, you do see 3 out of the 4 in the front, and then just a couple in the back. And yeah, they are able to sit, which a horse can kind of sit if they're trained to. And I'm not sure if a rhino can sit, but these guys can sit more often. Okay, and then there's a real close-up, again, of the anatomy to help you draw it more realistically, especially if you were going to like go to a zoo and you could see them really up close. You wouldn't necessarily have to see these in real life. If you knew that they had them, then you could draw them in your drawing. So the front foot has these 4 toes, kind of like 4 little miniature hooves, right? And then the rear foot just has 3. And then it has a pad kind of in the middle, like it's kind of more like a dog or a cat, even though they're not closely related at all, except the fact that they're both mammals. And there's a picture of me. You see my ring. That was last fall. I was in Costa Rica, and I don't know if you can see that, but that's the tapir footprint, and it's pretty big. That's why I put my hand next to it. Isn't that cool? And it's pretty deep. Sayla, no, I haven't drawn a lion in the wild, but I was at the Portland Zoo last May, and I was drawing them at the zoo. Okay, so now we move on. For those of you who are new, we kind of went over the basic anatomy of the tapirs, and now we'll just do a little short intro about my philosophy about sketching, and then we'll go right into the sketching. Good, and so my philosophy is I basically come from the idea, you know, let me share these. No, share. I basically come from the idea of a naturalist's field biologist perspective is I want you to be able to go out into nature with a sketchbook and to learn more about nature through the sketching process. So I don't want you to necessarily, be worried that you're going to try to spend, an hour on a drawing and make it perfect and frameable. I want you to think about being able to draw lightly and loosely and quickly as if you were in the wild or at a zoo or aquarium or natural history museum. And so I want you to basically think of the process over the product and the progress over perfection, meaning progress over time in both your, your hand-eye coordination as well as your observation skills, because we've really lost a lot of our observation skills, having technology at our hands, and being able to just, check something instantly and not ever have to memorize it. Whereas our hunter-gatherer ancestors for millions of years had to pass down all of their knowledge verbally to the next generation who had to remember it. I also want you to think of drawing as a tool for understanding. Just like I said before, it's going to help you to understand the structure of an organism and its behavior. If you're outdoors, like here in my backyard this time of year, we've got lots of robins, and we even had some crossbills coming through the other day. And of course, our jays and our woodpeckers. And so if you're sketching in the field, you're going to understand a lot more about their behavior and ecological interactions. Okay. And then I want you guys to have fun too. Okay. Next. So for you guys that are brand new, and even if you're not, I hope you can memorize this. Keeping it light and loose, meaning that your pencil should be held very lightly and not down here like this, hard as if you're writing your name, right? And tensing up. I want you to keep your arm loose, not like this. I want you to keep it nice and loose and moving. And then I want you to resist the urge to erase all the time. You'll notice that I'm going to separate the creating phase of sketching from the editing phase of erasing. So we're not going to do those like back and forth, back and forth. Again, we want to try to imagine that we're out in the field drawing something real and living and moving. And so you just got to get as many lines down as quickly as possible and erase later, maybe after the animal has walked into the forest or flown away. And then I want you to glance back and forth really frequently. Sorry, I have a hard time with my R's every time I was a kid. Frequently between the subject you're drawing and your paper, and especially not not getting too into just looking at your paper, because it's very easy to switch your brain from drawing observationally of what you're really seeing in front of you and to switching that into just looking at your drawing and drawing from your imagination, right? Or your your imagination or your memories, okay? And then today we're going to focus on drawing silhouettes, but I will continue on a bit. Let me see. Yeah, I was just going to show you a little bit about how I do it in the field. So I was going to add that too. Okay, and let's see. Okay. Oh yeah, and then this, many of you have seen, but if you're new, you haven't seen this. If you came in a little bit later after this started and you didn't get a chance to say hi, if you're brand new, please put in the chat box new so that I can say hi to you specifically, okay? All right, and so if you're new, I have this 6-step roadmap to sketching success that I like you guys to think about, and it's something that's part of my course that you can get online. If you go below where it says click here for resources, there's a link to my free course called Stick Figures to Songbirds in 60 Minutes. And that's my basic ideas. I kind of think of these 6 ideas while I'm drawing, and this really will help you a lot. And so the idea of blocking in your basic shapes, your circles, triangles, squares, thinking about proportions of one proportion to another, aligning various structures with each other, the idea of flow lines, or how your line is flowing across your subject, and thinking about, is it smooth or is it jagged? Angles, like 25 degree, no, what am I saying? 45 degree angles, 90 degree angles, that kind of thing. Okay. And then negative shapes. Okay. Okay. A lot of you guys are chatting in the chat box. Do I need to ban anybody? Because you guys are talking about a lot of things that have nothing to do with tapirs or drawings. So the next person that says anything that's not about tapirs or drawings is going to be banned. Okay. Okay. So we're going to see a lot less, because we're going to move on to the, negative shapes. Want to make sure you look at those negative shapes around your object. Okay, so now we're going to, so we're going to be sketching, and I'm going to demo field painting the tapir. And of course, we are using these adorable pictures. Now I'm only going to draw one of them, not this one, but this is one that you can draw on your own. And look at that face. Wouldn't you just love to have one? Like, it's a puppy dog. Doesn't it look like a puppy dog? If only they stayed 20 pounds. So these calves are only a few months old here in these pictures. I decided to use the calves because they are so much cuter than the adults. And to emphasize the fact that these species grow very slowly. It's one of the reasons they're endangered, is because they reproduce really slowly. The mother will only have a calf maybe once every other year, and she's pregnant for over a year, like 12 to 13 months. Can you believe that? And then they only have one calf. So they're basically only having one calf every 2 years. And that calf isn't guaranteed to survive. There are so many things in nature that could kill it, both natural things like crocodiles and, panthers and what else? The leopard cats. No, the leopard cat's too small. The leopard. Yeah, the leopard in Asia. But also because there are so many problems in their environment that is making them go extinct. So we've got lots of tropical rainforest destruction. So rainforests are being cut down for both cattle ranching and for farming and for oil palm plantations, and also for using lumber. So their habitat is being destroyed too. So when you combine the habitat destruction with a really slow reproductive rate, where you're only going to make one of these babies every couple of years, and then very few of those survive, that's why things, big slow growing mammals like these are more likely to become endangered than something that reproduces more quickly, like like a bumblebee we'll look at tomorrow. Okay. So yeah, so let's get going now. If you're new, what we do here is we get out of the slideshow and oh yeah, before I forgot, I didn't thank I didn't thank people. Where am I? I wanted to make sure to thank my donors from the last few days before we move on. And so I really appreciate the really generous donations you guys have given me that really helped me the last few days to decide that I could afford the time and funds to go ahead this month or this week. And so that's Terry, Allison, Jennifer. I also want to thank two different Catherines, Catherine with an I and Catherine with a Y, Christine, Carrie, Carolyn, and also Gurmeet. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Tamalin, hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, and Maribel. So I really want to thank all you guys for donating. Rebecca says, how old can a tapir get? Yes, you're right, 25 to 30 years if they don't get killed by one of those ways we were talking about. So anyway, moving on to happier things. Now we're going to go ahead. Now, if you're new, what I do is I pre-record this video so that I can talk and describe it better, because it's really hard to draw and talk at the same time. So that's one reason all you guys in the chat box should stop chatting and put your pencils in your hands, okay? And so and minimize the chat box if you can. Now, even if you don't have a pencil and a paper, I suggest you still watch this so you get a feel for my techniques, and then you can watch the replay starting now, which is 45 minutes into our event today. And so you can go full screen, watch it through, even if you can't follow along, and then come back and watch the replay. I suggest that you even watch the replay and draw it a second time anyway, even if you are drawing with me right now, because the more you do something, the better. Remember, progress over perfection. So the more chances you have to practice, the more progress you'll have. Okay, and so we're going to draw the big guy here, this larger guy on the right, and then you can draw the one on your left on your own. And okay, so we're going to get started. Who's ready? Okay, let's get started. So the first thing I do is I kind of air draw over my subject, just to really get a chance to look at it. You know, even if I'm drawing it in the wild, I will try to look at it as long as I can, because especially if you're in the wild and you see a tapir, by the time you look down at your paper and look back up, he might be gone. So what I try to do is I try to burn the image of my my subject into my retina, like visually burn it in. Like, you know how sometimes if you look at the sun and by accident, and then you close your eyes and you see a little sun in your your closed eyes? It's kind of like this. I want you to look at something long enough so that you could almost draw it from memory if it ran away. And that's a really good thing to practice. And that's something I have people do in my courses, is to look at something for a few moments. I won't tell them how long they get to look at it, but then I'll pretend it ran away and they have to draw it from memory. So that's what I do. I start out just looking at those structures. Yes, full screen time, Selah says. Okay, bye-bye. So I'm just looking at the whole thing, noticing all of the parts, and we've kind of talked about all these parts already. And so now I'm going to start to just draw little lines on the edge of my paper that's showing how big my tapir is going to be. We're just doing this right tapir today, because I am going to show a little bit of the painting of it. Okay. And so now you're not going to hardly see these lines, but don't get frustrated. You're not supposed to. You're just supposed to see how kind of fast and loose I'm going in the very beginning here. So I'm just blocking in that basic shape, those shoulders and the belly and the hips and the leg, and I'm not putting any pressure on it. That's why I'm able to go so fast, because, you know, it's a lot faster than if you were writing your name, right? And I'm always checking back and forth. That's why I'm bringing my pencil up to the photograph and then back down to the drawing to try to make sure I'm looking at each of those structures as I draw them. And I'm measuring the heights and widths. And we'll go over all of this for you new people again, but we just go really lightly at the very beginning to get a foundation of the whole critter, just the basic widths and lengths of the critter before we start actually thinking of it as ears or eyes or nose or snout or tail. Yeah, so I do a lot of that measuring. And even if it was something in the field, I would be holding my pencil up in front of me with that towards the animal, looking at it. Like if I was in a zoo, I would still kind of be doing the same thing as looking at those relative proportions. Remember those 6 steps we talked about? So that's what I'm doing right now, is just getting those relative proportions, the width of the belly and the hips and the shoulders and the head, and that thick neck. And now you see how I'm starting to push just a little bit harder, getting those angles and those lines of each structure. But I'm still going pretty light and loose. And I work on the whole animal really before I get any details in any one place. Because again, in case this guy ran off, at least I would have a quick outline like I do right now. Oh, I was supposed to cut that out. Anyway, so I did get, let me just stop right here. So I was just going to try to get that out of the way here. Right, there we go. So hoping you guys can catch up. Hopefully you're hanging in there. Oh, we have 22 people. Very cool. All right. So at this point, you should just have some very light lines that are just representing the width and the length and the height of the critter. And it's not realistic yet. You're just blocking it in as if you were like pouring the foundation of a house. When I was a kid, my dad was a contractor, and he built all the houses we lived in and other people's houses. And the first thing you would do after you drew up the plans was to pour the concrete. And that was the foundation. And you had to put that before you started adding the walls and the 3-dimensional structure, right? So that's what I like to think about in this section, is where I'm just trying to get my foundation down before I make anything look realistic. And I was just getting a little bit everywhere. Lizbeth says, do I give myself extra room on the paper when drawing in the wild? It just kind of depends. You know, I'm really fast in the field, and it just depends on if it's a mammal or a bird and how close it is, how far away it is, how fast it's moving. And yeah, sometimes I run out of room on the paper. I'll draw the head too big or something, but I generally try to think about the whole structure and how it'll fit on the paper. But my sketches often do have a lot of kind of little vignettes of things on one piece of paper, and some are unfinished and some are more finished. So you never know. Like, yeah, like I've got, just a sec, I'll show you. Like this is from Costa Rica last fall. And so I just did a whole bunch of these small thumbnails of these really cute Jacobin hummingbirds. And so they were small enough so that I knew that they would fit on the paper. Often I will draw something smaller if it's moving more quickly, because that'll give me a chance to actually draw the whole thing. Because if I drew it bigger, that would take longer. Okay, I don't know if that answered your question, Lizbeth. So let's move on. Hopefully you kind of caught up with just that basic outline. Okay, and now I'm just going to kind of think about it some more, looking at those structures, thinking about what to do. And so now we're going to start at the head and put some more emphasis on the head. So we're really trying to get that firmed up. The neck, the size of the ear, and of course the left ear is showing more than the right ear, which is hidden behind the forehead. And I'm just kind of doing the edges there. It generally is easier to draw straight lines instead of curved lines. And, oh yeah, I guess I thought I did do the head. No, I'm still just firming up the rest of the body a little bit more before I give any more emphasis. Lizbeth, I don't know about the stripes. You know, these stripes are just on the calves and they just serve as camouflage. Now, here you'll see me doing that alignment idea where I'm looking at what structures are aligned with other structures. So I'm trying to see where that shoulder is. And I actually did get the shoulder kind of in the wrong place. I think I fixed it later. But I was trying to show how the right shoulder is lined up with that left ear. See how I was doing that there? So I was doing a lot of this. So that really makes a lot of difference. Okay, so now you see that I've kind of gotten a little bit everywhere. I'm going to do some just cleaning up a bit. So this is the first time you notice that I'm doing any kind of erasing, okay? And so I'm just cleaning up sort of those little tri lines, because now I have a pretty good outline that I can firm up in a minute. Okay. So now we're going to go back to the head. Now that I got all four legs and everything, I'm doing that line, trying to figure out where that ear goes first and how it's lined up with that right shoulder. And then showing the other, kind of noticing how that other ear is hidden behind. So he's got a pretty big ear because these guys really need to listen for their predators. And then his forehead has a little dip, and then it's got the little snout that's sort of like an elephant. Although again, they're not closely related to elephants. You know, so they have all of these things that kind of make them look like they're relatives, rhinos and horses, but also make them look like things they're not closely related to, like elephants and hippopotamuses. And then his little snout, kind of his, what we call a prehensile snout, kind of like a monkey's prehensile tail, as they can really move it around a lot. It gives them a lot of personality, being able to move that snout. Then they got a big fat chin, and then they've got a jaw line that I'll add there. So that jaw line, just kind of like in a horse, that jaw continues up towards the ear. You see how I'm just looking at that alignment and then double checking that lengths and the widths before I go any firmer with my drawing. And now that I felt pretty good about that shape, now I press a little harder. And going down towards his chest, you can see his or her chest is very light colored, not a lot of pigment in that hair between the two front legs. And here I am again lining up, doing a lot of lining to see where those legs are compared to the body. Okay, and And then, I just like to really make sure that I have the main part of the body, the height and width of it all correct before I put too much detail into the legs. I'd forgotten the eye, so I'm back to the eye, sorry. And I'm looking at where the eye is located. So when you're trying to place an eye on an animal, it helps you to measure kind of how far down it is from the top of the forehead and maybe how far in it is from the edge of the snout. And then, of course, how large it is. And then remembering to leave a little highlight. So I'm going to leave a little part that isn't shaded to make it look alive. And you can even also see the whites of its eye, which is kind of separate. So just like us, we have a white on our eye, but there's also a little highlight from the light of the camera. Or, well, this might have had a flashlight on the camera, but in real life might have sunlight reflected. So anyway, there would be two lights, the white of his eye and then the highlight. Okay, so he's got a funny little face with that big old chin, doesn't he? And so now we're going to move on to those front legs. Looking at that right leg and just kind of going just slow. You see, I just do these little straight marks and I'm looking back and forth. That's me moving the pencil back to the photograph, making sure that I'm really looking and noticing where it is. And the width of the hoof, those little hooves. And we don't see all four toes, but we know they're there. So we look for them and just see how many we can draw. Yeah, we're looking at those little toes. They kind of have a hard little hoof, kind of like a horse, but there's 3 of them. So on that right front foot, we only see 2 toes because we're going to have a side view. And you see how I'm going a little more slowly here. I really want to get that correct. And I'm going a little bit darker. And now we notice that negative shape between the 2 front legs. See that negative shape here? Oops, here. That's really obvious negative shape. So think about that shape as much as you're thinking about the shape of the 2 front legs. And that's going to help you, by default, draw the shape of the 2 front legs. And in this, yeah, so that's the knee, right? Or not the knee, sorry. That's the wrist, actually. That's the wrist. And then, so I'm measuring that. That's a little wider area. And I'm going more slowly and I'm looking back and forth the whole time. Noticing how many toes I can see, pretty much just those 2 large toes, and then that 4th smaller toe that's a little shorter and in back. That's right there. Yeah, we're just going more slowly, and then that's the elbow right there that I just, right there where I'm erasing, I'm just cleaning up that area of the elbow. So remember how we looked at the skeleton, and we would want to remember that there is a little line there, and then we might show it later when you're shadowing, that there is that little elbow right there. Just like we have the knee right here and the ankle right here. So I'm just cleaning up those lines a bit, just lightening them up. Bronson, good. You think yours is good so far? Good. Now I'm going to continue on with the belly and making sure I've got the belly the right width. And then getting the back a little bit, the neck. It's got some fuzzy neck, and then the back. And then right there is the hip. So remember from the skeleton that this whole area here is the hip, just like where we sit. And so there's always kind of a bump on top, just like when we drew the horse, and then a bump back here showing the back of the hip where you and I sit down on a chair. So I'm just noticing that right there. And then just double checking where that top of that hip is supposed to be before I firm it up and go down towards the rump. And it's just got the cutest little button-like tail that hardly shows. It's so cute. And the tail right there as I added the tail. And now I'm just lightening things up again, those tri-lines, before I firm up the line that I really like. Okay, so now we're going to do that back left leg, and we're going to notice where this is the knee. So just like on us, it's got a kneecap, if you remember from the skeleton. And then back here, this is the ankle. They don't walk flat on their feet. They're kind of walking on their tippy toes, again, sort of like a horse. And right there is where the hip is, the knee is, sorry. It's kind of camouflaged because of all those lines, and that's the whole idea of all of those camouflaged lines that the calves have. But you see, I'm indicating that knee bone right there, that kneecap area right there. So that's why it's really important and useful to look at skeletons either online or when you're at a natural history museum or a zoo. Make sure to study the structure of the skeleton, and it's really going to help you understand all the bumps and angles of something you draw, especially mammals. And doing just these short, straight lines, just one area at a time, because legs can be really hard and it's hard to get all those angles right. So that's why you just look at one little line and then draw it, look at another and draw it. I was kind of fixing his feet. Getting those little toes, and here I am again using my pencil as a line, trying to see what's lined up. So his or her toes are lined up with the kneecap, I noticed. Do you see that? I still see we have new people just coming in, and I hope you can watch the replay. We're towards the end now. But we started an hour ago. I usually try to keep it to an hour, but sometimes this is going to probably go an hour and a half because I'm going to show you the painting part too. But you don't need to stay for that, but you can just, we're almost done with the sketch. Okay, so now we're going to go on to the right rear leg. And that's kind of hidden, especially because he's so camouflaged. And that's the whole idea of the camouflage pattern, is it makes it harder for a predator to see what's what, just like for us to draw it. But we can see here a little bit that other leg that's kind of hidden, drawing the kneecap area and then the ankle area and then those toes. And we can see two toes. And just cleaning up some lines there. Again, you see how much I'm really separating the creating phase from the editing phase. So now I'm just going back to the whole thing. I'm going to start at the beginning again at his head, and I'm just going to strengthen all those lines. But that doesn't mean I'm necessarily just tracing over them Like you'll see how I'm going to change the shape of its snout a little bit. So as I'm going over and strengthening these lines, I'm not just tracing, I'm modifying a little bit as well. I really wanted to show he's kind of got a Roman nose, like a Mustang horse, and then a little kind of a bump to his nose where he's got a snout. And then he's got some soft fur. So this is where I will kind of also darken up, showing some of the soft edges, because some areas are kind of more fuzzy than others. And then strengthening the eye, strengthening the ear. And just like horses' ears, they kind of have an overlapped area and then a little shadowed area inside with a bunch of fuzzy hair to help protect things from getting in the ear, or protect the inner ear from getting things in it. So I'm going along the body. I'm not just doing a strong line. I'm doing a little short little lines that are kind of suggesting the fur. And on some parts of the body, it's outlined a little more strongly, like the back of the hip there. And in other areas, like his neck and his chest, is going to look a little fuzzier with the fuzzier fur. So like right there, I'm adding a little fuzz there, just suggesting it. Oh, you're welcome, Ileana. That kneecap there. And the fur is shorter on the legs, so it's not going to be as fuzzy as maybe on the neck or the chest where it's longer. Bronson, you're welcome. Okay, just continuing to look. Just working on it a little bit. I'm going to keep it light, that rear leg just not very emphasized to make it look like it's farther away. Okay, getting that elbow just a little bit. And short little strokes to make it look like it's fur a bit. Showing those 3 toes that we can see, but remember they do have 4 on the front and 3 on the back, just in case you were able to see another one at a different angle. Maddie is done with both. Wow. Now, one last finishing of the head. I want to give a little bit more emphasis to his mouth. The end just kind of turned down a little bit into a frown. And then he's got that big chin that doesn't have much fur on it. Just has some whiskers on it, sort of like a horse. Remember his relative, the horse? And then some longer fur on the cheek and the chest. Selah, I'm glad you're very happy with yours. Good. Again, I'm noticing that line of the ear and the chest, and I kind of made it, I wanted to fix that right front leg. It was a little bit too far forward, I noticed. Okay, goodbye, Selah. Okay, so how we doing here? We're done with the main part that I usually show, but I did continue on with this one. Just to show you how I would have done it in the field, because critters like this that have a lot of tiny markings, it's kind of hard to figure out how you would add those. And, you know, you could do it in colored pencil, but it's really hard to go around all those white stripes and spots. And I did try to do a demo in colored pencil, and I just gave up, and it made me realize why I always use watercolors. So I'm going to keep going with showing you how I would do the watercolor in my sketchbook. This is a book that happens to have some colored paper in it, which is nice. I really like to work on toned paper, which helps make a drawing look more finished. And I do have a blog post about that on my website, giving a lot of examples of my artwork I've done on toned paper and how I did that. Kathy, I'm glad that you enjoyed it. Wonderful. Thank you. So I'm gonna, Chris says we can't see your sketchbook. Oh, I'm gonna show you in a sec. So, well, yeah, this is just a sketchbook, just a hard-covered sketchbook. I really like sketchbooks that have a really firm cover. So, oh yeah, so that's right. I forgot. I was going to add all these stripes. We forgot about that. Oh, right. You said I'm tiny at the bottom of my screen. Chris says you can't see my sketchbook. Oh, that's right. Well, you'll see it. Well, let me show you a second here. So this is the finished example that I'm going to show you guys. So if I were out sketching in the field, I would have drawn a sketch that was kind of like the one I showed you. Of course, we went really slowly, step by step, and this would be a lot faster. And the more you've drawn something, the more you can draw it faster too, once you really know its anatomy. So that's another good thing to try, is try to draw like 10 of these. Like if you were to look at my slideshow again and try sketching all of the images from the slideshow, and then you would get a really good idea of what they look like. And you could probably even draw one then without looking at one. So once you've drawn one a lot more, you could draw it a lot faster in the field if you were lucky. Yes, Diane, you really notice their anatomy when you're drawing them. That's right. So now I'm just adding all these stripes, but I wouldn't have done that if I was going to do this in the field in painting. I'm just showing you finishing up. If I was just going to leave this as a pencil sketch, then I would have noticed all these stripes and spots. I've talked to you guys before about the concept of what's important to know about your anatomy that has to be exact, and what things can be more loose. So obviously with the tapir, one important part of his anatomy is that big trunk-like proboscis. You have to have that, else he might look like something else. But in terms of spots on these calves, those can be really different. And I'm sure every individual looks different. The whole idea is just to have this what we call disruptive coloration, which is disrupting the edge of the structure so that the predator can't see it, and so that they're camouflaged in their forest background. So the number of those stripes and spots aren't going to matter as much as like the size of the proboscis or the number of toes, right? Good. Okay. Chris and Bronson and Diane, Rebecca, Kathy, thank you. All right. So anyway, for fun, I just thought I'd show you how I would approach doing a critter like this that has a lot of detail of light spots that are hard to show. And so, you know, in the field, though, I wouldn't have this big mixing tray. I would just be mixing on this, in this little tray right here, or even just right on my paper. So then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cover the whole thing with this brownish color, and then add the spots later. And so in terms of a brown, you notice I mixed one. So I didn't just take a brown out of my palette. I made something that was a little more interesting, which was basically a mixture of a purple and a burnt sienna, which is a really warm brown. And I probably ended up making him look a little bit too purple, but I can pretend maybe that we're looking at him at night when he would have been darker. So I think I've talked to you before about when you're choosing a color, how to make sure that you're really thinking about the color from an artist's perspective, or even a naturalist perspective. So, we're not going to think of color as just brown or black or white. We want to really think of it more uniquely. And so, especially when you're mixing colors, you might mix something more interesting than just taking a brown straight out of your palette. I think we talked about painting black before as well. So there are very few things in nature that are jet black, like the black of night or a black hole, right? Most things in nature that are black are going to be kind of a purplish or a bluish or have some other tones to them, especially in the light. So the same thing with this guy is he's not just brown. He's got some warmer parts. He or she has some warmer parts to his face, especially that one on the left looks more what we would call like a yellow ochre or an umber. And then this one on the right, his head is lighter, but his chest and his chest is light as well, but his back area is more darker brownish purple, right? So anyway, I'm just filling in the whole thing with this purplish brown. And again, this is just kind of a quick demo of what I would do in the field, because I do like to have you guys be comfortable with trying to work in the field and not thinking that you have to set up some perfect studio with a million colors and have all day for it. Now here what I'm doing is I'm just kind of cleaning my brush and just having clean water and just kind of making the edges softer there to leave that white chest, that unpigmented chest. And then I'm actually kind of rubbing the cheek area to remove some paint because I got a little too dark. So if I squeeze and clean that water brush, I can just rub it on that body, that cheek like I did, and lift off some of that dark color. Okay, so that was it, and then I let it dry, so you can see how different the color looks now. It doesn't look shiny, and when you're in the field, you can really tell if something's dry when you touch it and it's not cold anymore. Because sometimes it's hard to just kind of look at it and you think it's dry, but it's not. And we're going to add some colored pencils on top, and those definitely have to wait until something's dry. And so I let this dry for a few minutes. If you're at home and you're in a hurry, you could actually also use a hair dryer, or you could just let it dry. So it has to be super dry to add the color patterns on top. So what I did was I was kind of practicing because I wasn't sure which white pencil would work the best. There are a lot of different white pencils. So you can have white pastels or white charcoals. So I was just kind of practicing looking at how those whites looked on my dark purplish body. And then I was also doing a little bit on that other color too, that umber, that yellow ochre. So once I decided which pencil, they were all sort of the same, but I just chose the Prismacolor pencil. And then I'm going to use that to put the stripes on. Now, first I decided to finish the eye and the highlight in the eye and that dark shadowed snout and then his mouth. So I was kind of going back and forth with adding some darks with a dark colored pencil. And then this is fast forwarded here, so I'm not drawing this quickly. But just so that you don't have to watch, because you probably don't have these materials with you. So I am just doing it real quick. And again, I'm looking back and forth, but I'm not trying to be exact because I know that the number and size of spots is always just really different in every individual. And it doesn't really have anything to do with what species it is. It's just going to look various ways. So I didn't have to be that exact. Now, Rebecca says you do. Okay, that's wonderful. You have those materials. Great. So I was just kind of going back and forth again with giving some darks and giving some highlights. using that pencil both as highlights on the edges of the ears and the snout and the highlights in the eye, as well as using the white pencil just to add those white stripes, which also aren't exactly white. Some of them look a little bit more tan or gray. You know, some of them are sort of a warmer white. Some of them are cooler white. So you can give a little bit more personality to it by looking at it more closely. Diane, you like the idea of colored pencil over watercolor? Yeah. Colored pencils on their own are super slow. So I always get my base as a watercolor first, and then I'll just add details with colored pencils and pastels. Also because, you know, I don't like to use a whole lot of colored pencils when I'm in the field because they break and I lose them in the grass, and it's a lot harder to keep track of than one palette of watercolors like we see right here, right? So often I'll just have a couple of white pastel or charcoal pencils, or even a jelly roller pen, you know, those gel pens. And those are good. Those white ones are good for also adding white highlights. Karen, I'm glad you enjoyed it. Gladys, goodbye. Okay, so anyway, that was kind of him finished, and then I added the words for fun, which would have had a lot more words on it if I were out in the field or at a zoo, actually. Carolyn says, is it just white colored pencil or charcoal pencil? Right, so it just depends on the brand. You know, I was trying a whole bunch. Where were they? Oh, I don't know where they are, but I have a lot of different, both pastel pencils, charcoal pencils, just regular colored pencils. And I also use, like I said, those white gel roller pens, I mean. So it just depends on what you have. You should just experiment with your materials, or when you have a chance to go to an art store, you know, buy some different ones, because it is pretty hard to find a really nice opaque pencil that will go over watercolors. You could also use gouache sometimes. And if I'm in the studio at home, I will also use these other paints that are really opaque called bleed proof white. But I don't like to teach all that. I like to teach things that you can do in the field. So generally, you're just going to want to experiment with different white, pastel, and charcoal pencils and see which one is the most opaque. Good, Diane. Good. Thank you. Thank you, Rebecca and Carolyn. Wonderful. Okay. So we went an hour and a half, which is kind of par for the course. Okay, anyway, so thank you very much. I got to get going, and take care, and we'll see you tomorrow, hopefully. And don't forget to share this with your people, and don't forget to donate if you can afford it. But don't worry if you can't, but at least share it if you can. Okay, ciao, ciao.